Ashley Benefield, the Black Swan murder trial, it has wrapped up, and she has been found guilty of manslaughter, a lesser charge than second-degree murder, the initial charges that were brought against her. She now faces up to 30 years in prison for that. We have a lot to break down, from the closing arguments to Ashley taking the stand with Shavaun Scott, psychotherapist and author. I've been really looking forward to talking with you about this from a psychological standpoint, because there's a lot to dissect here. And before we get into the verdict, before we get into all that, I want to go back to initially the closing arguments that were made, and also Ashley on the stand. We should probably actually start there, because that's obviously before closing. She was up there the other day. Quite a show, and I think it left a lot of people, emotionally affected. I've heard people crying. I've heard people saying she's full of crap. I've heard everything on this, and we'll take a look in a moment. But before we do that, what was your reaction to uh, her the prosecution on the stand after her on cross, and also her own defense, questioning her about the situation?
Yeah, I have to say I went into this case trying to stay very neutral
Hmm.
about it, and I have worked a lot with domestic violence cases over the years. I used to run a domestic violence counseling center for women, and I have strong feelings about it, but I've also seen cases where people have lied or where
Hmm.
people exaggerate, and so of course not everything that's alleged is always true.
Hmm.
But I found her testimony so incredibly compelling.
Hmm.
And I thought the defense did a remarkable job of putting on the evidence, including professionals. I thought they really proved their case. And I thought the prosecuting attorney really put her through a meat grinder. And I think that was one of the things that was so hard for people to witness. It just really seemed to put her back in a state of PTSD. And we all felt that as we
Hmm.
were observing it.
Yeah, I try to be very middle of the road on this one too. Initially, I was very thinking, I don't know, because we're going to hear from the defense of or the prosecution of everything that led up to this, and Ashley kind of running around, not letting the father of her child have any access, and there had been no court order saying you can't. It was just really, not ethical or legal activity, quite honestly, that she was engaged in there. Um, eh, but then we heard her voice on the stand. Let's take a look at this, and we'll talk on the other side. This is when she's being grilled by the prosecution, and I want you to pay attention to kind of what I would look at as some kind of hot and cold reactions here, from utter distress to everything's okay. And I want to hear what your thoughts are on the other side. Let's look.
But on this day, you weren't concerned about him coming over.
I, no, I knew he was coming.
Okay. And when he came over, your mother and Emerson went to the park.
I believe they were headed there. I'm not sure. I think they were down the driveway or on the sidewalk, something like that. They were on their way there.
You weren't so afraid that you wanted your mother to stay there and watch.
No, we were just packing to move.
Okay, so you weren't afraid.
I definitely didn't expect this to happen.
So it was up to you that your mother left.
Yeah, at that time.
Okay. So if I heard you right during your direct, you said he bumped your shoulder twice. Body check, I don't know if that's what you called it. He walked into you with a box, right?
Yes.
And then at the end, you say he slapped you?
He hit me. I don't. I wouldn't know how to classify it. He struck me. He hit me.
Was his hand open or closed?
I don't remember.
Okay. And because of those things, you claim that you thought he was going to kill you.
He had never hit me before.
Okay. And you thought he was going to kill you.
He wouldn't let me leave. I tried to leave. He stopped me.
The question is, you thought he was going to kill you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you were in the bedroom, you decided to get your firearm. And it was where?
It was in a storage bin. On top of the laundry basket.
Okay. So I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 52. If you could turn around and look at that. Where was your firearm?
It was in the bin on top of the basket.
Here?
That's the basket. The laundry
Where was the
basket.
bin?
It's that right on top.
Okay, so it was in here.
Yes, ma'am.
Why would you have a firearm in there?
I had just emptied all the furniture and everything out of my room, and it was kind of like what was left from my drawers, and so it got put into a bin.
Okay. And that was not your only firearm in that room, correct?
Correct.
You had a firearm in the closet.
My carry gun was in my backpack, which is my purse at the time.
So in this room, with a mattress and a broom and a hamper, you had 2 firearms.
Yes.
So you go into the room and you grab your firearm. Is it in a holster?
I don't remember.
Okay. And you claim that Doug does what?
He came and slammed the door open. He was standing in the doorway. He said, "You're fucking done."
He said, "You're fucking done." And that made you fear for your life.
Yeah.
That's a testimony that we heard. What was your reaction to that, seeing it again?
Yeah, I feel that she's genuine.
Yeah.
You know, she's consistent. She's clearly having a variety of emotional reactions as she goes through and tries to put herself back in the scene and tell the story. She's affected on a very deep level. I didn't get the sense that she's rehearsed or play acting. It seemed
Hmm.
very genuine to me. And in the cases I've seen, the many, many cases of women who have been through scenarios like this, it's just kind of classic. The prosecutor wanted to make the point in the beginning, well, why did you let him come over? You let your mother leave. You couldn't have been that afraid. Well, that's how these relationships work,
Sure.
because the victim over time comes to believe that if I behave just so,
Hmm.
if I do all the right things, I'll get the good side of him and things will be fine.
Hmm.
And they don't ever expect that it's going to go bad. And
Hmm.
so when it does go bad, it's almost like it's a surprise to them again.
Hmm.
And so it may sound non-rational, but humans are non-rational.
True.
And that's just how these relationships go.
And that's kind of where I have some questions about the rationality with some of this stuff. I was surprised at some of her testimony there of, did he slap you? Did he hit you? Like, what happened? And she doesn't seem to remember that moment of what it actually was. I don't know. I find that one a little odd. I would think that after going through this is something that you would have in your mind, at least an idea of. There's a big difference between being punched and being slapped, and it was, from what we've heard in the past, number one, she has made allegations that he was physically abusive in the past. It turns out she just said there that he wasn't. So she has contradicting stories right there to previous testimony in a child custody case. To say, I don't remember here what happened, I don't know. I just find that odd. I mean, is that something that one's going to block out in a traumatic moment?
Yeah, I didn't have the sense that she was blocking out what happened. She simply only knew, and she may not have been looking at him at the time he struck her, and it could have been a
Hmm.
slap or a backhanded slap. And if she wasn't anticipating it, she wasn't expecting it, she wasn't looking at him as he did it. She
Sure.
only knew she was struck.
That there was a strike
And
going on. Yeah.
something hit her and she knew it was him, but she hadn't been focused and paying attention and trying to go, oh, I better remember exactly how this happened because
Hmm.
someday I'm going to be testifying in court about it. You
Sure.
know, so that really wasn't where her focus was. It was more of a fight, flight, survival. She
Hmm.
knew she was hit. She knew she wanted to get away. And
Hmm.
then he prevented her from leaving, which is always a really bad thing.
Yeah.
And again, a sign of one of these really scary
Yeah.
relationships when the perpetrator doesn't allow the victim to leave.
And I don't feel like Doug is any angel here. I don't want to have that come across that I'm not believing a victim. I believe there's a big mix of everything that was going on here. I feel like these are two toxic individuals who had very toxic behavior, liked guns a little bit too obsessively,
Mhm.
and were quick to react and quick for emotion. And I mean, look, they got married after 13 days, so they're fairly impulsive people. It's a more understanding that someone's going to draw a gun this quickly if you're already an impulsive person. Let's take a look now at the closing arguments of the prosecution against Ashley Benefield, and ultimately, this is what the jury, I think, seemed to really take a close look at and go, "Yeah, this didn't seem quite right. Maybe you didn't. This wasn't any sort of intentional murder. This wasn't premeditated, but you still did it, and there's a track record of you." Trying to manipulate the system and him leading up to it. Let's take a look at that testimony.
This defendant used domestic violence and allegations of it to make progress on her goal. And her goal was she wanted sole custody of that child at all costs. After knowing each other 13 days and a 30-year age difference, they married each other. According to the defendant's testimony, very shortly after, there starts controlling behaviors and name calling. Within days of these anger outbursts in South Carolina, there's a lavish wedding reception where everyone seems to be happy. And then within about 3 months after that, the defendant gets pregnant. In the midst of all of this, she gets pregnant. The very next month, she moves to her mother's house in Florida because she's so sick and needs someone to take care of her. That is the last moment that this defendant ever lived in the same house with Doug Benefield. She filed for a South Carolina injunction while she's in Florida. She doesn't even live in South Carolina. But she starts a series of complaints in Florida. She starts saying he violated the South Carolina injunction, and she claims he's poisoning me. He's poisoning me and my unborn child. When she goes early to give birth, she doesn't tell Doug. She doesn't tell him once the baby's born. For weeks, he didn't know this child was born. Then she does not put his name on the birth certificate. The conversations that she had with Detective Gillum are the entire crux of this case. It is her motive, it is her plan, it is what she did everything for. He said her true motives were to use the criminal system to affect her family court case. And now we're in a stage where we're acting like we're going to get back together. Because she knew the court system was not working, and she was afraid that if she didn't buddy up to him, he was going to get this child away from her. So it begins the charade of her telling him, we're going to get back together, we're going to be a family. She played on Doug Benefield's wishes. He wanted more than anything to have a family, his family together, to have his wife that he loved and this child all together. Doug finds out she's dating someone else. He files for divorce. And a series of complaints start against Doug Benefield for now abusing the child. So they go to this evaluation with Dr. Broder, and this deception on the part of Ashley Benefield continues. She does the same thing. We're going to reconcile, we're going to get back together, and then when she's not with him, she's saying that that's not true. And she says to him, I'll take matters into my own hands. And that was 7 days, up to 17 days before, depending on about what time it was, he gets murdered. They did not live together for 3 years before the homicide. And if there was violence towards Ashley Benefield in South Carolina, that was 3 years before. And they hadn't lived together since. And is that something that justified her being in such fear of Doug Benefield that it was necessary to shoot and kill him?
I think that's a big question here. And I can understand, like, you don't trust the court, you don't trust the system. The system oftentimes does screw up. And if you know this person's history of his own abuse and manipulation, again, she did say there had never been physical abuse up until that moment, that if the court's not taking you seriously and you think in the best interest of your child is this person not to be a part of their life, you may try and go down that road. which she clearly did. But then also, they kept talking about getting back together. It doesn't show a lot of, I don't know, good faith on the part of Ashley. Like, why is she trying to get back together with him? Or why is she, again, why is she inviting him back? And why is she saying one thing to him of, yeah, we're going to move together, while at the same time telling her attorney that, no, I'm going to move on Monday separately. And Doug's still thinking that they're all going to be together. It doesn't make a lot of
Yeah.
sense to me. Like,
Yeah,
what's
no,
going on?
it doesn't make sense logically, but folks embroiled in these kind of relationships are simply not logical on
Hmm.
either side.
Sure.
If we take the clinician who I thought was very good, who
Hmm.
saw both of them and described him as a stereotypical alpha male invested in power and control,
Yeah.
and that Ashley had a pattern of appeasing him to try to keep him calm. If we look at that as that was the flavor of the way they related,
Hmm.
this guy would get angry, this guy would intimidate, she would go along with him just to try to keep the peace or to try to
Hmm.
get him to cooperate. And so is that the best way? Well, it from her point of view, it may have been the only way to try to navigate this system,
Yeah.
sharing a child with him.
It,
It's just awful when you have these cases as a clinician because you're dealing with the court who may or may not understand anything of what's going on, and you're trying to determine what's the best interest of the child,
mhm.
but then you've got two adults who really aren't able to be rational.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what we're talking about. You have one that basically operates on intimidation,
Yeah.
and you have the other one that operates on manipulation. And it turns into something like this. This is not a case where, like, one I think is a healthier person than the other. I think they're both very unhealthy on their own ways. But then this is how they interact, and this is why nothing seems to mesh up here or make any sort of rational sense. The point you made earlier is none of this is rational.
It's not rational.
And
And to give her some credit, she's a very young woman. And I don't think most of us, male or female, in our 20s, but I can certainly speak for
sure.
lots of young women, don't have good relationship skills. We don't
Hmm.
have good assertiveness skills. We don't know how to use good judgment in relationships. My gosh, decisions I made in my 20s about people I dated.
Sure.
I don't really think we can lay that on her as something malformed in her character. It's
Hmm.
simply immaturity for her.
That's true. That's another key part in this, because he is 30 years her senior.
Yeah.
If we all think, like you just said, think back to our 20s and the decisions that we made, like, yeah, if we were under a microscope, there's a lot of questions that I think could be made about every single one of us. Let's take
Yeah.
a look at the defense arguing about Doug being obsessed with Ashley, and we'll talk on the other side.
Doug Benefield shoots a gun into the ceiling of their kitchen to intimidate Ashley to stop speaking, throwing a loaded gun at Ashley Benefield, threatening suicide, punching the dog so hard that he knocked the dog unconscious, threw the cat down the stairs, put a tracker on her car. The neighbor catches him in the yard at night, cursing, yelling, screaming, belittling. Text messages, I'm in a murderous mood. I want to rid the earth of them. Take them out. That was about two guys having a conversation while Ashley was on a cruise. Doug Benefield was so demented that just hearing in the background two men speaking while Ashley was on a cruise makes him say he wants to take them out, rid the earth of them. That puts him in a murderous mood. How about driving from South Carolina to Florida so that you could follow Ashley in the car? I mean, if that's not determination, what is? If that's not fixation, what is? If that's not obsession, what is? And most chilling, I thought, was Mr. Vincicaro, the realtor, who, while the injunction is in effect from South Carolina, look at the email between Doug Benefield and Vince Vincicaro. I asked him, did you have any dealings with Douglas Benefield? Yes, I did. What was it? He was a customer looking to buy a home. Where was that home? It was the house immediately behind Ashley Benefield's house. This is sick, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, disturbing behavior, no doubt. Again, I don't think Doug was a great guy by any means. And who the hell texts their significant other, I'm in a murderous mood, after they hear some men in the background on a freaking cruise ship? It's not like she's at Chippendales. It's like she's on a cruise with her mom, and you're in a murderous mood because some
Yeah.
people walked by that happen to be men. I mean, that's like,
Really red
oh
flags.
my God.
Yeah, the more I listened to his texts, the history with his ex-wife,
Yeah,
texts from her, it was just red flag, red flag, red
sure.
flag for a potential dangerous person. Anybody who stalks or surveils a woman,
Hmm.
particularly near the end of a relationship where there's been these dynamics of power, control, and
Hmm.
intimidation, that is a person who is at very high risk for murdering that person. That's just statistically.
Yeah,
People who go into that behavior are scary people. So I
yeah.
can understand from her point of view, this young woman, fairly naive, poor assertiveness skills, she did not know how to navigate with this guy.
Hmm. No, I agree completely with that. And the tracker on the car and all that.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm going back and forth on this because there are, because all this is irrational, but I can understand both sides to a certain extent, and that's why I'm just kind of in the middle on this. I'm like, I don't know how this should have ended up, because there's this toxic behavior here on both ends. But she's younger, I do understand that. But when you break into like the former wife, the ex-wife who had passed away, and that information that she found on the text of him kicking her when he basically couldn't get it up and needed to use Viagra, and was so frustrated at himself that he does these uber, I mean, I hate the term, but the toxic masculinity with this guy,
it fits.
it's
Yeah,
insane. And
yeah,
I mean, I've seen guys like this. Being a guy, I've had guy friends that I've seen like this, where the woman is like rejecting them or has moved on or whatever, and they just go into this blinder, like, I have to do whatever. It's like, calm the f down. Like,
yeah,
what? But it's scary because it's like a switch is flipped, and you're not going to get him out of that mode. It's like this weird obsession. And it's very difficult to calm that down. And it seems the only thing that can calm that down is if they get in contact with the former significant other, and either they just work it out, they talk it out, and then he feels good about himself or whatever, or something horrible happens. And quite oftentimes, horrible things happen. So I
yeah,
do understand her fear uh,
yeah,
in this. I guess it just all comes down to, with the track record of what we saw of what she was doing to avoid him, and then the manipulation that did come into there, and then him want. I mean, it's not crazy to say you want to see your daughter, and this person is not allowing you in any way, shape, or form to do it. You may go a little over the top to try and get close to figure out where your kid is. I can understand that too. But was it justifiable that she pulled out a gun out of the two weapons she had, basically in a room with not much else in? That shows, I think, a little level of paranoia right there, to go and kill him, when
yeah.
there isn't a lot of other evidence. Again, she said there's no history of physical violence, but yeah, he gets between her and the door. It's I kind of, I'm not trying to belittle her or compare her to an animal, but it's like, I would think almost like you have a scared animal here, an abused dog
You
or
let
cat or
people have
whatever.
space. If
Yeah,
people say, "Give me
yeah, hmm,
space, leave the room, let me
yeah,
leave the room," you always
yeah.
do that.
You
Number one
approach,
rule,
yeah,
give people
yeah,
space if they want it.
yeah,
And this is just another one of those cases where if there had not been a handgun in the home,
hmm,
he'd be alive, no
yeah,
question about it. And neither one of these people were psychologically well enough
hmm,
to be gun owners. They
yes,
simply weren't. And how many other millions and millions of people who are not terribly stable, who have drinking problems, who've got all kinds of personality issues going on, have guns out
hmm,
there. And that's just another unfortunate thing, that the gun is
yeah.
what ultimately caused this to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not anti-gun, but I am anti-gun for people who are not mentally stable to have them. And yeah, I mean, had that ingredient not been in this mix, we would not be here talking about this right now.
Yeah.
Who knows what else would have happened? God knows, when you have these two toxic personalities, I think there would have been a blow up at some point, but maybe someone wouldn't have been dead.
Exactly.
No. It's a bizarre case. Her sentencing has yet to take place as of our recording. She does face up to 30 years. I think it's a minimum of 11 or 11 and a half is what is going to be there. And of course, there's potential for, 80% and all that. So we'll see where it all plays out in the end. But not second degree manslaughter,
No.
justified or not for that sentence. Should have been non guilty, or what are your thoughts?
After listening to all the testimony and particularly the professionals that worked with them both,
Mhm.
I would have said not guilty. I mean, I think it's a horrible, horrible, horrible thing
Yeah,
and terribly, terribly regrettable in all directions. But I personally wouldn't have convicted her.
sure. Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.